Today's subject is an onshape drawing of a pear cam, this time not by putting in actual numbers, but by putting in variables to represent the dimensions. And the purpose of this is if this was a drawing that had to change later because of some discussion in a project, you would change maybe one or two places for the dimensions, and then everything else would change relative to it, as opposed to having change all the dimensions associated with a drawing. All right, so this is a screen you probably start with, something that looks like this. You should be working in the folder that has to do with the project you're working on. So click on My Onshape here in the upper left corner, and then that will give you a list of all the folders you're working in. I'm going to put it into the automata folder because the cam goes into the automata. Now I'm going to create a new drawing document. I'm going to call this parametric model pear cam, my name, and the date. Okay. All right, so as in most cases, we're going to start off with a certain view. So I'm going to click on the front panel. That's where I'm going to do my viewing. All right, so one thing that does need to exist is a variable. And so here you need to add a variable to this feature list. And the variables have to appear before the sketches that are going to incorporate these variables. And so if you look on the ribbon here, there could be a location to a tool for the variable, but it's not there. So I click on Search Tools over here on the right side. I click on or type in variable, and just as I begin to type, it shows me the variable tool. I click on it. It's represented by this X, this cursive X in parentheses. Okay, so I now get this window where I'm going to name my variable and give it a value. So I'm going to name it D, and the pound sign is associated with variables. And so when this variable is displayed in a little while, you're going to see a pound in front of the D to represent it because it's representing a variable. Now I'm going to type in the value of the variable. You want to leave the unit. If we go back to Google Classroom, we go back to your last assignment. This is you're drawing a cam with actual dimensions, with actual numbers. If you click on the document of the cam dimension drawing here down below this PDF, it gives you the 4 different cams, and here it's done mainly parametrically with variables. You can see with the pear cam, the radius of the bottom circle, here I'll zoom in a little, is half of the diameter D. This we'll call D a nominal diameter, nominal of the cam. Then this small circle has a radius of 1/4 of D. I want to remind you, if you haven't seen the last video, that this is the radius. So if the radius is 1/2 of D in this case, the diameter will be equal to D, the nominal diameter. In this case, the smaller circle, if the radius is 1/4, excuse me, of the nominal diameter, then the diameter is half D. And then last of all, this dimension, the distance between two centers, is half D. And again, these 3 dimensions all are based on this nominal diameter D. So let's go back to our drawing. We need to give it a value. If you recall, in the last video, we gave it a value of 2.0 inches, and that's because anything bigger will not fit into the automata. Okay, so now I can click Enter. And now you can see here, there's a variable in my feature list. Pound D, pound referring to variable, D, the variable, is equal to 2 inches. All right, so that's wonderful. But if we go back to the drawing again, this cam has a thickness, 3/16 of an inch. So I'm going to use a variable to represent that as well. I know that this hole is not a square, but I asked you in the last case, in the last homework, to make it a square, each side being 1/4 of an inch. So why don't we make the side of the square here also a variable. So again, I'm going to go find the variable tool. Now the variable tool is here. You can see it. So I'm going to click on it. Now I want to represent the thickness. Let's call it T. Now I'm going to put in the value for it. 3/16 of an inch is what was being asked for in the drawing. And I click on check. And you'll see again, pound T. Again, pound representing variable. Now I can click check to say I'm done. And then last of all, we're going to create another variable for the sides of the square hole that we're going to make. And we'll call that variable S. You can see I'm working in this window here that's created from the variable. And if you remember, it's 1/4 inch. I'm going to hit, so I hit enter there. You can hit enter, you don't have to, and then but you definitely want to click on the check mark. So I think it's probably a better practice to hit enter after entering the value. Make sure there's units. Now you can see the 3 variables, D, T, and S, are all represented here, all with a pound sign in front of them. Now I can begin my sketch because my sketch is going to depend on these variables, and that sketch will be down below here, listed in the feature list. So I'm going to click on sketch up here in the upper left-hand corner. It's asking me for what plane I'm working in. I'm going to work on the front plane, so I click on it. Now I'm going to start with a circle. I'm going to click on the center, the origin, excuse me. Okay, so here's a detail that's important. I'm going to click and drag, and now I need to click, if you remember from before. So now it's waiting for me to enter a dimension. If I call this dimension D that I just used for the nominal diameter, it won't know I'm putting in the variable D. It will think I'm using the shortcut key D for dimension. So you need to enter something here. So I start with a number. You can't enter the pound sign because the pound sign means to rotate the view. So all those shortcut keys it's confusing the program. It thinks it wants to use a shortcut. So type in a number that's not meaningful in this case. It thinks you're entering a dimension. It's expecting a dimension. But now back up, delete it, and now type in pound. All right, so typing pound means I'm going to put in a variable here. And it lists the 3 variables that I've declared. So I'm going to click on the one that I want. Now I hit enter. Do not enter units. Just pound to locate the variables that are available to you, and then the variable that you actually want, in my case D, and then enter. All right, now you can see I have a 2-inch diameter circle, and I used a variable to make that. So now I have this circle tool highlighted, so I can go ahead and click and drag to create my next circle. Again, I'm going to click to finish. I'm going to type in a value. 1. Again, because it's expecting a value, a dimension value in here, but I'm going to back up. I'm going to click, I'm going to enter pound to see the list of variables. Again, I want D because the upper circle is also based on D. But in this case, I'm not going to just hit enter here. I don't want this circle to be a dimension of D, diameter of D. I want it to be a dimension of D over 2. So I put divided by 2. Now I hit enter. And now this is a 1-inch diameter circle. All right, I want these 2 centers lined up. So now I'm going to come in, just as in the last discussion when we were making the paracam with numbers, I'm going to click on this constraint tool here, but I'm going to click on the arrow to choose the vertical constraint. It needs to know what I'm constraining. So I'm constraining this center, click, with this center, click. So now these 2 centers are constrained. I want these 2 centers to be constrained. If you recall, it's 1/2 of D, that's nominal diameter again. So let's use that variable just as it is. So I'm going to click on the dimension tool right here. I'm going to click on the 2 things that I'm dimensioning, the center here and the center here, and then dragging over here to place this dimension. I need to click. Again, I need to enter a number. It's expecting me to enter a number. If I don't, it won't work. But I don't want the number 1. I want a variable, so I'm going to click enter, pound. Pound again displays all the variables that are available to me. I'm going to click on D. Again, I don't want this to be exactly D. I want it to be D over 2. So I put the division by 2 first, and then hit enter. And again, now this is a 1-inch separation between centers. Okay, I'm going to continue to draw. Just in the past, as I've mentioned too many times probably, I am not closing this sketch. I'm going to continue sketching. This time I'm going to add the lines between the circles. So I click approximately where I want it on each circle. I don't want this line to come off the end of the first line, so I'm going to click on line, then click on line again, then click on the top circle, then on the bottom circle. So now I don't want to make any more lines, so I'll click on line again. My circles are done, but I don't want to finish sketch again because I want to constrain this. I want these lines to be tangent. So I'm going to come up to the tangent tool again, click on the little arrow, click on the tangent constraint. Remember, when you're using the tangent constraint, you need to be at the end of the line that you want tangent to something. So you click on one object, and then on the second object, the two objects you want tangent to each other. Again, I'm going to click on the end of this line that's closest to the circle, and then on the circle itself. So I'm clicking on two things to tell it what is tangent to what. End of this line, tangent to this circle, and last of all, end of this line to this circle. All right, so now these four ends of lines are tangent to these 4 points on the circle. There's one last thing you want to do before you click Finish Sketch with that check mark, and that is trim. So again, I'm going to click on the scissors here, trim, and then I'm going to click on the things that I want to trim. I want to trim that, I want to trim that. Be careful here, there's so many things. You don't want to trim away the dimension, you just want to trim away the part of the circle. Here again, also trimming away. This is a dimension, it's not part of the circle. So I just trimmed away that part of the circle that I wanted to get rid of. If you're looking for some guidance here, when you trim, you're trimming between two intersection points. So because this circle had this whole part left, when I clicked on this one part, everything between this tangent point and this tangent point were removed. All right, now I have a contiguous figure, so I'm going to click on the check mark to finish the sketch. Whoops. You know, it looks like I was incorrect in my statement. It looks like there was something left. So what I can do is, I've already finished sketch. I can go right click on sketch 1 and click edit. Now the trim tool is available to me again, and now I can click trim. And it didn't trim away my dimension, thankfully. It just trimmed away that part of the circle. Now I'm going to finish sketch again by clicking on the check mark. All right, I'm going to pan by hitting the control key, right mouse button, dragging. Okay, so now I want to extrude. So I'm going to click on the object I want to extrude. I'm going to click on the extrusion tool up here on the upper left-hand corner. Okay, so if I click over here to show it three-dimensionally, you can see that it's already done a default of 1 inch. So that's wonderful. So I'm going to highlight this whole thing. I'm going to put in a number. Now I'm going to hit enter pound again. I'm going to tell it what variable I want to choose, in this case the thickness T. You'll notice there is no dimension here. If you add a dimension after pound T, it will not work. So it has to be just pound, choose the variable, and now it says pound T, and now I hit enter. And now it has extruded to the 3/16 that is in this variable right here. That is this variable. I'm going to click on the check mark to finish sketch. All right, we're almost done. So now we're going to add a square hole. So I'm going to click on the front face, zoom in. Okay, so I'm going to click on sketch to enter the square and click on the plane that I want the sketch to be in. But over here, instead of clicking on, again, center point circle, I'm going to click on the little arrow to the right of it. And sorry, instead of choosing corner rectangle, I'm going to choose center point rectangle that's available to me when I click on the arrow. So I choose center point circle. I click on the origin to start my square and I drag it. So again, I'm going to click to finish, to somewhat finish. I'm going to enter a value because it's expecting one. I'm going to delete that value by hitting delete. And now I'm going to hit the pound sign again. Enter the pound sign, excuse me. Now I'm going to choose S, that's the the variable over the value of the variable s, the variable that represents the side of the square. Hit enter. Now again, this side of the square wants a value as well. I'm going to enter the number 1, but get rid of it. Now enter pound, choose S, and enter. Okay, I am finished with that sketch, so I click the check mark to finish. I am now going to rotate so I can see this three-dimensionally. If I zoom in, you don't see the square. So what that probably means to you is that the square is on the other side. And now if you zoom in, you can see it. I'm just going to pan a little bit here with the control key and the right mouse button. Okay, now the last thing to do is extrude this square. So I'm going to click on, try to click on the square. There we go. Now I'm going to click on extrude. All right, you can see that it extruded out as an add. I want it to be a remove. It thinks it wants to remove in that direction, so I'm going to grab the arrow and bring it over here. All right, so now it's gone to this random distance of 0.36 inches. I am going to put in the number 1, delete it, enter pound, and again, I want this thickness of the paracam T to be chosen out of that, so it's pound T. Again, don't enter a unit here, just hit enter, and then click check to finish. And now we have a paracam that was made parametrically with variables as opposed to entering numbers. And again, the big value to this is if you needed to change something, you could change it in one location and it would change everywhere. For instance, if I wanted to edit this and not have the nominal diameter be 2 but be 3 inches, I would change it this one place. Enter, check. And now I have a paracam that's based on a nominal dimension of 3 inches as opposed to a nominal dimension of 2 inches. Thank you for listening.